Hey guys, I've been wanting to record this first as a video, and then I thought it's gonna be pretty long and I don't want you to look at my face the entire time, so I thought about making it a podcast kind of episode like the one about my name journey. And this one, as you probably see from the name, is going to be about dysphoria and insecurities. It's a topic I got interested in talking about after I think Dell in their video that I'm going to link below talked about how gender dysphoria and insecurities can interlock and can be connected, but they can also be completely different. And I started thinking about this, and it's, in my opinion, a pretty interesting topic. I'm going to make this firstly for myself so that I can look back on this and listen to this again maybe in a couple of years and see how I've changed and how much I've accepted myself and what ways I found to deal with my gender dysphoria. I'm also recording this for people who relate to me and my experiences, who feel the same way or can see themselves in how I feel, and I think this kind of visibility really helps people feel less alone. And I'm also recording this for people who don't feel gender dysphoria but want to understand and empathize with their friends or family or loved ones who do feel gender dysphoria and maybe try to understand them a little better. So the first disclaimer I'm going to make is that I'm going to talk about my specific experiences. A lot of people feel gender dysphoria, a lot of people in the trans spectrum. It could be binary trans people, non-binary queer people, gender fluid people, all kinds. And everyone is different, everyone is unique, and so the way they experience and feel gender dysphoria is also very different. Some feel a very small amount of it, some feel like it's so bad that they can't live with themselves. So it's going to be like a trigger warning and also a disclaimer that I'm going to talk about my own experiences with both dysphoria and insecurities. And if you're still here, I'm going to start with the definition of dysphoria. The gender dysphoria involves a conflict between a person's physical or assigned gender and the gender with which he, she, or they identify. People with gender dysphoria may be very uncomfortable with the gender they were assigned, sometimes described as being uncomfortable in their body, particularly developments during puberty, but not for everyone, and being uncomfortable with the expected roles of their assigned gender. People with gender dysphoria may often experience significant distress and or problems functioning associated with the conflict between the way they feel and think of themselves, referred to as experienced or expressed gender, and their physical or assigned gender. So this is the definition of gender dysphoria, and the definition of insecurities is just lack of confidence about something associated with yourself. It can be social, it can be, like for instance, you could be insecure about public speaking, or it can be in appearance, much like dysphoria. So for instance, you can be insecure about your acne, and with dysphoria you can be insecure socially again, like for instance the way people address you, if they use the wrong pronouns or your dead name that you no longer use or associate yourself with. And it can also of course be physical, where some parts of your body just don't feel like your own and you want them either ignored or changed or hidden. For instance, for me, that is reason number one why I wear lots of like really baggy, oversized clothes. I know it's not the same for everyone, but for me, it really helps me feel more like myself. And I feel really bad and very dysphoric when I have to wear clothes that like sticks to my body or that shows off, I guess what other people would call curves. Ugh, I know, it's horrible. Even talking about this doesn't feel right. If you don't know me, or I don't know, maybe don't know what I identify as non-binary, meaning that I don't feel like I fit into either one of the two boxes that are usually given to people to choose from, which is male or female. I'm also a afab person, which means I've been assigned female at birth, which again I don't associate myself with, and which is where my dysphoria usually comes from, because usually people see you and read you as your assigned gender. There is also such thing as gender expression, so I express in a much more masculine way than what my assigned gender would want me to, I guess, socially. There's a lot of stereotypes. There's like, oh, you're this, so you need to wear this and have this kind of haircut, and it's very old-fashioned, but it's still there, and I've been raised to believe that if I was assigned female at birth, that is what I was supposed to look like, and my mom is still very much displeased, is this a word, with how I present, and she doesn't understand my identity, so there's that. I have this list in front of me in which I list things that make me feel dysphoric, and also things I'm insecure about, and I've also listed things that could potentially help, in my opinion, with both or either one of them. So I thought that I'd talk about them in examples, because it's kind of easier to understand, in my opinion, the difference between dysphoria and insecurities if I give you specific examples. One of the things that give me a lot of dysphoria is my proportions. I have the proportions of my mom. Genetically, I've just been lucky to get her proportions. She's very... I can't even, help me, Jesus. It's just that I have kind of very small shoulders and wider hips, and that's exactly how my mom's shape looks like. And this is the thing I can't stand in myself, and every time I see myself without lots and lots of baggy clothes, I can't stand it, and it just feels like this isn't me, this isn't how I'm supposed to look like. So that's, to me, how dysphoria feels. It's just an overwhelming sensation of, this isn't me, this is wrong. While I'm insecure about my height, for example, most at health, which I'm also insecure about my height. I've always been tiny. I think that's because I wasn't eating very well when I was a kid. But I've been small my whole life. At some point, my dad was like, I was small too, but then after 9th grade, I suddenly became very tall. And I'm like, oh, I'm going to wait till 9th grade and then I'm going to be tall. And that never happened. But it doesn't cause me dysphoria. It's a thing that I wish was different, but that's fine. It's something I got used to over time, and I stopped just caring about it, and I'm just wearing chunky shoes with a huge platform now to kind of compensate for that. But it's just an insecurity that I can deal with. Would I like to be taller? Yes. Is it okay that I can't? Yeah, that's fine. Another thing I'm insecure about in terms of proportions is extra weight in certain parts of my body. I feel like I've been made by society to think that this part of me needs to be thinner. And I think that's really bad. It's a bad way of thinking. I'm really into body positivity, but usually my brain tells me that body positivity is allowed for other people, but not for you. You need to be this, this, and this. And so, again, it sucks, and I would like to love myself unconditionally, but this doesn't cause me dysphoria. It just, I'm looking somewhere around butt area and being a bit too fluffy, a bit too thick of a boy. Or for instance, if we're talking about butts, stretch marks through advertisement and photoshopped models and stuff like that showed me that people's butts and legs don't have stretch marks. And it is a lie, of course. Now that I'm 25, I obviously know this. But for a while when I was a teenager, I thought that I would never be comfortable about anyone seeing my thighs or legs or butt, because I had stretch marks since I was a teenager. And I thought that it was my fault, that maybe I ate wrong food, or I didn't do enough exercise, or even though now I know after like research and articles about body positivity, people just get stretch marks sometimes. It doesn't even, like, I was as thin as a stick teenager, and still it doesn't have to do with your weight, it doesn't have to do with your health. So if someone tells you that, they're wrong. But it was just something that I've never seen in, like, I want to say magazines, even though I never really looked at magazines as a teenager. I only watched cartoons. But like, generally we consume so much information through TV and advertisement and internet later that I just thought people didn't have stretch marks because everyone who was in an advertisement or a movie or somewhere, they just didn't have them. And so I had this insecurity. It is no longer an insecurity, to be honest, for me. I'm kind of like, yeah, okay, stretch marks, whatever. But it used to be for a long time. Another thing that I want to talk about dysphoria-wise is the voice. I think if you're like me and you at some point thought you were trans, probably like binary trans because you've never heard of other queer identities, that's my experience. You've probably been in the same boat where you binge watched lots and lots and lots of trans videos where this is my first day on T, this is my first month on T, and at the time, boy oh boy, I thought this was all I wanted. I looked at how happy those trans guys seemed after like their voice was starting to change, and this was like the biggest thing for me, not even appearance wise, not beards, not like a facial structure or hairline. It was always the voice. And quite honestly, on my own, when I'm alone, my voice is just a tool. My voice is a tool that I use to convey certain things to other people. So on my own, I don't really consider my voice to be a thing that gives me dysphoria. However, in a social setting where people hear my voice and I'm no longer alone, it becomes something that puts me in a category for them. They could see me, and most of the time people either read me as a 15-year-old boy because of the way I dress, or like a tomboy girl. And more often than not, I feel like before I speak, they're like questioning, which is kind of where I'm comfortable in. I like being somewhere in this gray area where they're like, I'm not sure what this is. But as soon as I speak, they're like, oh, okay, so this is just a weird ass female who has a really bad fashion style. And that point, it triggers me almost more than anything else. Triggers my dysphoria, I mean, where people just immediately put me in a box like that. I know that I live in a country where non-binary people are not only not represented, but practically non-existent seeming. Of course they're here, but it just feels like yes, it's a little hard to talk about it because it's something you can struggle every day with, and you get used to it. But then once you start talking about it, it's a little heavy. I guess I feel like my voice betrays me, and so I would want something different, like if I could buy a different voice. At the same time, I'm not a man, I am not a guy, and I'm not male, which means that fully transitioning or taking T and to change my voice would also give me other things that would give me dysphoria, but just on the other part of the spectrum. It's really complex. I think dysphoria is a very complex feeling, and I think in that regard, like we just talked about, what helps with what helps me with my proportions or my height is mostly clothes. I do find that style can change a lot, and it's a really comforting thought that by changing your style you can feel a lot better, or like cutting your hair or something like that. But with the voice, if hormone replacement therapy treatment isn't an option for some reason, or you're still confused whether you want it or not because it's a big step, then I guess only therapy can really help. I think it's very important for people who feel out of place, like queer people, to go to. I think everyone could benefit from therapy, but with queer people specifically, what is hard is that your experiences aren't talked about on social media, maybe, but not in the bigger picture, like in the movies, and not just like art housey small movies that you can barely find a way to watch, but like big movies like Marvel or Disney, or just like pop culture doesn't accept that you exist, kind of, or I don't know, just feels like that. So going to therapy and talking to a person about your experiences can really help. And what my therapist told me is that I should start trying to see my voice not as a female voice, but as a non-binary voice, because I'm a non-binary person. And that's what I did with my name. My name is Simon, and although most people see it as a male name, it is a non-binary name for me, because it's just a combination of letters. Why does it even have gender to begin with? But also, I am non-binary, thus my name is queer, non-binary, gender non-conforming, whatever, So I should start trying to see other parts of myself the same way. Like, this is the voice of a non-binary person, and that's okay. Also, I think that what could help if you're really struggling with this is trying to find someone in a similar position, I guess. For me, talking to my partner really helps. I'm a little bit afraid to cause dysphoria in them sometimes, but just knowing that there's someone who feels the same way, it just makes you feel so much less alone. And I think that's very, very, very important. Another thing that makes me feel insecure about myself is acne. And I think it's one of those things that is also like the stretch marks is just not represented enough in movies and TV shows. And so, like, if you walk outside, you will very likely see at least maybe 30% of people have acne. And in the movies, I don't know, I've watched a lot of movies and most of them don't really have character, like it's either a specific trait, like it could be a villainous kid from the neighborhood who has I don't know, braces and acne, like it's a trait of a character. But other than that, everyone's covered in makeup, even teenagers, even children sometimes are covered in makeup in movies and TV shows. So like when you have acne and dark spots and even scars, you feel insecure and you feel like you're ugly or that you're not as good looking as other people. And that's just the stigma of it, and obviously you will feel insecure about it when the rest of the world tells you this is not pretty, this is not how it's supposed to be. But I think what really helps with that, if it is represented, which is why I just I couldn't stop thinking about it when I first watched Scam. I know I've talked about Scam before, but for those who don't know, it's a Norwegian TV series about teenagers. And I think it was almost the first TV series I've seen where teenagers didn't have any makeup on. As bizarre as it sounds, it was revolutionary in my head. I felt like I've struggled with acne almost all of my life as an adult, and nothing really helped me feel better about myself. Like when you put lots of makeup on it, it just looks cakey and not nice. But Scam, just like watching it for a week, looking at all those faces and all those skin types, at all of those people who just have acne, and you still love the character, like you still relate to the character and you love the character. It doesn't make them any worse. It doesn't make them the villain. It's not a trait. It just made me feel so much more comfortable with my own self. It's bizarre. It's such a small thing, and it changed so much in me. Like, since watching that, I felt so much better, sincerely. And then watching, for instance, Druck, which is the German version of Scam, again, all over again. There are characters that I relate to. They have acne. I have acne. I like the character. So maybe I'm likable too. That's kind of like the process of it all. It's kind of like, that's normal, that's fine. And it's so empowering and so comforting. With the stretch marks, the same applies. When I watched Orange is the New Black, and there were like shower scenes where you could just see people of all sizes and colors, and you're like, that's amazing. That's great. I love it. And then you see different companies starting to advertise body positive ads, and they say specifically that there is no Photoshop. And as a photographer myself, lots of people have asked me to use Photoshop on them, and I think it's very sad, because people are great and beautiful the way that they are, and we should really like create those new standards where this is normal and it's beautiful, and fuck everyone who disagrees, you know. But on the topic of acne, another thing that somehow makes me extremely dysphoric is makeup. And I know what you're thinking. I have makeup videos and I like them, but it's a very specific type of makeup. For instance, I am really into skincare, and I love skincare. It feels pampering, it feels healthy, it feels like I'm taking control. But then there are things in makeup specifically connected to the makeup of eyes and lips that makes me extremely dysphoric. And I think it all comes down to, this is what society tells me I should wear. This is what my mom has always wanted me to wear. This is what is appropriate for my assigned gender, which is why I would just want to repel this with my entire being. Like, there was a moment in London where me and my sister were walking down the street, and there was a really sweet hairdresser who was about, 50, 60 years old, and he said, "Hey, my assistant is learning how to cut short hair. Would you mind having a free haircut for him to experiment and stuff like this?" And we're like, "Sure, sounds great." And while he was doing it, the assistant, he kind of washed off some of my foundation, BB cream on my forehead, where I had lots of acne at the time, and that of course made me feel insecure, not dysphoric. And when they said, "Oh, hey, we kind of messed up your makeup a little bit, do you mind if we retouch it?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, sure, that sounds great, please do." And they gave me to the makeup artist in their salon, and I was like, "Can you just like retouch the forehead, and that's about it, thank you, I'm okay." And she said, "Yeah, sure, and how about I do you a little neutral makeup look?" And since I cannot say no, which I should work on, I really should work on learning to say no and having boundaries, I was like, "Sure, okay, yeah, sure." And I thought, there's no really harm, I guess, in having a neutral look. She's not gonna put like red lipstick on me or anything, right? So it's gonna be okay. But then the lady considered a neutral look to be quite feminine, and I can't. This is why dysphoria is confusing and it sucks. The second I looked in the mirror, and it was like a neutral lip, kind of like a nude color, and then it was kind of like just like mascara or something in my... The second I looked into the mirror, I felt like I was about to cry. Like, I felt like this wasn't my face, like it's unfair, like it's horrible, like I have anxiety, I have suddenly this anxious feeling in my heart, and a lump in my throat, and I just want to cry and take it off now. Like, that's how I feel about certain feminine things. Obviously, the solution to this would be just don't do it. Just don't put a mascara and a red lip. Sure, which I'm not gonna do. And if I were to repeat this situation, I would obviously say, no, thank you, just put some foundation on my forehead and I'm gonna go. But I guess that's the difference between insecurities and dysphoria. Dysphoria is so intense. It's so illogical, because logically, with my own brain, with my own head, I understand that a red lip isn't female. A red lip doesn't inherently have a gender color. A man could wear a red lip. It wouldn't make him a woman. A non-binary person could wear a red lip. It wouldn't make them female or male. A skirt, which I also cannot wear, or I will feel really, really fucking bad, is not inherently what it is a piece of cloth that's been sewn to look like a skirt. That's all there is. A man could wear it, a woman could wear it, a non-binary person can wear it. Anyone in the world can wear it. However, my dysphoria tells me that if I wear it, I am going to explode, or just through the roof, straight to the moon. I guess dysphoria is a lot harder to accept, in my opinion. With insecurities, I learn to love myself just the way I am, while with dysphoria, I really struggle. I need therapy, and I feel very isolated, while insecurities, I know, are universal and are easier to talk about and to share. And I think what helps is just generally trying to have a good mental state, trying to be stable mentally, and then it will be easier to deal with. I find that this works best for me. There were moments when we were traveling with Erin when people would use wrong pronouns for me, and because we were together and I was just happy, and my heart was full of love and my mental state was great because I was with my loved one, I just couldn't fucking care. I couldn't give a shit. I would just say, I'm a lady, thank you. I would make it a joke. I would make it bigger. I would dramatize. I would just go, thank you very much, my lord. I'm a lady, and bring me my tea. Like, it's funny. When you say it this way, it invalidates dysphoria in a way that's not. It's kind of like it doesn't matter. It's a constant work on loving yourself just the way you are. It's work on trying to have enough rest and sleep, to be mentally stable, to work on insecurities too, to be confident enough in yourself to battle dysphoria. It's all interconnected. It also has to do with representation. The more representation I see in the media, the better I feel. Unfortunately, there isn't a lot of representation for now of non-binary people or queer people, and I'm sure someone in the comments is going to be like, there is this TV show, and there's like an ace non-binary person there. It's great. It's incredible. But I'm tired of trying to find this one singular character that appears for 2 minutes of each episode who is supposed to be my personal representation. Like, it's great that it's appearing somewhere from time to time, but it just needs to be more accessible, I guess. I get tired from straight people in movies because I'm like, and like being homoromantic or gay or whatever is like, you get representation now. It wasn't there when I was a teenager. None of it at all. So of course there is hope that another 10 years are gonna pass and there are gonna be thousands and thousands of non-binary or genderqueer or gender non-conforming characters, and that's great and that's lovely, but for now it can be hard. And if you're struggling, I understand. Boy, do I understand. Like, if you're on the trans spectrum, do yourself a favor. Watch season 3 of Druck, which is German Scam. I can't even link it in the description, honestly, because you will see probably a character that you can really, really, really relate to, and that's important. I remember reading this quote. It was about race and representation of people of color, but it really stuck to me because it really works in other ways too. I'm gonna read it to you now so that you know what I mean. You guys know about vampires? You know vampires have no reflections in a mirror. There is this idea that monsters don't have reflections in a mirror. And what I've always thought isn't that monsters don't have reflections in a mirror, it's that if you want to make a human being into a monster, deny them, at a cultural level, any reflection of themselves. And growing up, I felt like a monster in some ways. I didn't see myself reflected at all. And I think that's what representation to me is all about. It's isolation, and it's, if there is no representation, and it's making you feel like you're wrong, like your entire being is wrong. And I'm gonna end this podcast episode on giving another, I guess, example from my life. When I was a teenager, like from 13 to 16 years old, I found a community in cosplay. It was anime cosplay at the time. And I felt like I belonged there because back then I didn't know anything about gender identity. I just felt a little wrong, just a little too quirky. I was starting to be attracted to people of my, I guess, gender or of my sex. And I was just feeling like maybe something is a little bit wrong with me, I don't know. But then in cosplay, I could be a character and I could experiment with my gender expression by dressing up in different characters. I almost always, and I think always did, male characters, but in anime, male characters are quite feminine, so there was this balance of like, I never wanted to be like a guy man. And it was great, and I experimented with new pronouns, and I felt very, very comfortable in them. Back in the day it was he, him, but now I use they, them. And I felt like this community understood me. There were a lot of people like me who experimented as well and who felt very comfortable in that. And it felt great because obviously at the time I didn't know that LGBT community existed, and it was LGBT at the time, not LGBTQIA+. So basically I thought that those people were like me, and so I didn't feel isolated anymore. I didn't feel lonely. I felt accepted and I felt good. But then as time passed, people started to change. They started to return back to their origins, I guess you could say. They dropped the pronouns. They started using the pronouns which were the same as assigned at birth gender requires. I guess they were like in straight relationships, and they were presenting as just cis girls, I guess, at that point. And I felt like I was losing something, like I was losing connection, and as the ground beneath my feet was like crumbling a little bit, because I was like, wait, what's happening? Why is this happening? Is this how it's supposed to go? What? Why? And this time of your life, the teenage, young adult time, I don't know, it's when I feel like you really try to find yourself and understand yourself. And I felt very abandoned suddenly. I felt like oh, I guess I'm just fucking weird, because all of those people, they were like, yeah, I pretended to be a guy and that I was in a gay relationship with other guys. And honestly, I'm just a cis girl who likes guys, so I'm straight cis girl. And I accepted myself and I love myself. And the only reason that I acted like this before was because of inner misogyny. And I thought that guys were cooler, so I wanted to be like one. And I pretended to be like that I was queer because it was more rebellious and like interesting. But actually, I'm just a cis girl who is also straight. And obviously it didn't work like that for me. But people kept telling me that I need to kind of wake up, kind of like stop pretending. And I wasn't pretending. I was not ever a cis lady. So it felt like an attack to me. Like they were suddenly all normal in how society wanted to see them. And I wasn't. Yeah, it was a weird time. I was very like, no, that's wrong. And I didn't have the language for it. I didn't know non-binary existed. It was never mentioned till I was like, even on the internets where I was, till I was like 21. So you can imagine from like being 13, 16 and like till 21, you are not even sure what you are. There was no representation. And I guess it all just made me feel like I'm wrong. Like something's wrong with me and I'm weird, like a little too weird. Like those people who said they were queer and who experimented with their gender expression with me. They all suddenly grew up, and that's what it was all about. And they've explained their change of mindset later as something being caused by the inner misogyny and I guess the teenage moment of I'm not like other girls, when you just want to be edgy and different. But for a lot of queer people, I feel like communities like this are the only safe space they can really experiment in, because school definitely isn't one of them, you know what I mean? And I guess with the lack of representation, and when the only safe space you have, the space community you have, turns on you, you just don't really know where to go. And I'm really thankful to myself for sticking up for myself and not letting anyone tell me who I am. Because I am non-binary and that's it. That's that on that. And I know a lot of people think non-binary is a made-up term and you need to grow up and choose. Quite honestly, I don't care what you think, and you don't know how non-binary people feel. And to this point, I was almost afraid to admit that I'm afab, because I felt like all my work to bring visibility to the non-binary issue would go to waste, because people would immediately just see me as female. I want to be proud, you know? I was raised as an afab person, and it made me who I am. And quite frankly, I think my mind is pretty feminine still, and I'm not gonna bring it down because of inner misogyny. Because I've been doing it for a while. I've been doing it most of my life. It's hard to get the thoughts out of your head where feminine is worse, feminine is less valuable. It doesn't change that I'm non-binary. I'm not suddenly a strong woman. But I'm not ashamed of where I come from, I guess. I'm proud to be an afab non-binary person. And whether or not I do anything to change my voice or my hips, or whether I do get top surgery in the future or not, is not going to change that. And I just want to be proud of who I am. And I hope you can be too. If you're listening to this and you feel alone or you feel misunderstood or wrong, it's gonna be okay. And you're unique and special and amazing. And there will be people who will appreciate you for just the way you are, just who you are. You know? You don't have to change for anyone. Thanks for listening to this long-ass podcast. I know it wasn't very concise or well-made, maybe even, but I just wanted to put it all out there, and I hope it helps someone, or even if it doesn't, maybe it helped me, Bye-bye.